All right, today we're jumping into one of the most famous prophecies ever recorded. It's a divine message that was delivered to a terrified king at a moment of absolute crisis. And it's a story all about faith, fear, and a sign that would echo for centuries to come.
But here's the puzzle that really kicks this whole thing off. Imagine you're in the worst trouble of your life, and you're offered a miracle, any miracle you can dream up, as proof that you're going to be saved. I mean, what kind of person turns that down? Well, that's exactly what's about to happen.
Okay, let's get right into it, starting with verses 10 and 11 of Isaiah chapter 7. This is where we meet our guy, King Ahaz of Judah. He's a man at his wit's end, and he's about to receive an offer an offer he can refuse.
To really feel the weight of this moment, you've got to understand the stakes. It's 736 BC, and King Ahaz is in a full-on panic. Two rival kings have ganged up with one goal in mind: invade Judah and boot him off the throne for good. Can you imagine the terror? The source material says his heart and the hearts of his people were shaking as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. They were utterly petrified.
It's in this moment of pure fear that God makes his move. Through the prophet Isaiah, he tells Ahaz, ask for a sign. And just look at the terms here. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above. This is basically a divine blank check. Anything you want, from the deepest part of the earth to the highest point in the heavens, to prove I have your back. What an incredible offer, right? All meant to forge the king's faith in the middle of this crisis.
So what happens next? What does a desperate king do when he's offered a miracle on a silver platter? His response, which we find in verse 12, is genuinely shocking.
Ahaz says, I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. On the surface, it sounds so, devout, doesn't it? So respectful. But what's really going on behind those words?
Yeah, this wasn't reverence, it was a flat-out rejection. And what's fascinating is why. This wasn't just him being stubborn. You see, Ahaz had already made a political calculation. He was looking to the mighty Assyrian Empire for military help, not to a god he couldn't see. So his so-called piety was just a convenient excuse to stick with his own earthly plan. Our source material cuts right through it, and I love this line, calling it wicked Ahaz clutching his moral pearls.
Ahaz's refusal doesn't end the conversation, not even close. It just changes the audience. So let's move on to verses 13 and 14, where the Lord provides a sign anyway. Only this time, it's not just for a faithless king, but for his entire dynasty, the house of David.
You can just feel the prophet's frustration boiling over here. The whole tone shifts from a gracious offer to a really sharp rebuke. Isaiah is essentially shouting, "Is it not enough that you exhaust the patience of people? Are you now going to try and exhaust the patience of God himself?" You know, Ahaz has pushed things to the absolute limit.
And because Ahaz wouldn't choose a sign, God chooses one for him, and this is it, the famous Immanuel prophecy. Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. This is no longer an offer. It's a divine declaration, an unstoppable event that's been set in motion.
And the name of this child is Immanuel. Now, the source material points us to the New Testament, which explains its meaning. And this wasn't just a name, it was the entire message packed into two powerful words: God with us. A promise of divine presence right in the middle of all the chaos.
But this prophecy wasn't some vague, far-off promise. As we see in verses 15 and 16, it came with a very specific and very immediate timeline that was meant for King Ahaz himself.
First, we get this curious detail. The child will eat butter and honey. Now, we might think that sounds kind of luxurious, but the source explains its shocking, counterintuitive meaning. In this context, it's a diet of hardship. It's what you eat when an invading army has ravaged the farmland and normal agriculture has totally stopped. So it's actually a sign of the difficult times ahead.
So the crucial point here is that the prophecy provides a countdown clock. Let's just walk through it. First, you've got the 9 months for the child's birth. Then the prophecy says that before this child is old enough to know right from wrong, let's call it about 8 or 9 years old, the two kings Ahaz fears so much will be gone. And here's the payoff for Ahaz. By 732 BC, his enemies are defeated just as the prophecy foretold. This was a direct, time-sensitive promise with a clear deadline.
And this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn, because this sign wasn't just for Ahaz. It was a message that would echo through the centuries, what the source material describes as a dual prophecy, with two very different and very profound fulfillments.
This really lays out those two incredible layers. On one hand, you have the immediate historical sign for Ahaz. A young woman in his time has a son, and before that boy is even a youth, Ahaz's political problems are solved. A promise made and a promise kept. But then, on a completely different level, the language is so elevated, it acts as a type, a kind of foreshadowing, pointing to something far, far greater, hundreds of years in the future.
That long-term fulfillment is explicitly claimed in the New Testament. The writer of Matthew quotes this exact passage from Isaiah and applies it directly to the miraculous birth of Jesus Christ. And that connection transformed a historical prophecy for a faithless king into a cornerstone of Christian theology. So we're left with this final thought. A message of reassurance for one frightened king becomes a message of hope for millions. It forces us to ask, what does it mean when a sign, given for one specific moment in history, has the power to resonate with such force centuries later? It's a testament to the layered and enduring nature of this incredible text.